I developed an eating disorder when I was in my teens. I went through all variations and flavors of disordered eating and eating disorders. And with somebody on the other side helping you, I think it's a different experience than doing it by yourself because there's somebody who's kind of got your back,
Yeah.
who's skilled in this, who's like letting you, they're a container for it for you. And
Mhm.
that was really helpful to me to feel like I wasn't all by myself. And then when I had some big emotions come up, she would be there to handle that, to sort of be that presence through it, which was something that I had that was very absent in my childhood, right? Like this was not something
Mm.
I ever learned how to do.
Today, I'm pleased to introduce to you my special guest, Stefanie Michele. Stefanie is a binge eating recovery and body image coach specializing in helping people overcome food and body image issues. She holds degrees in human development psychology and occupational therapy with a certification in integrative health coaching and intuitive eating counseling, and is currently working towards her certification in somatic experiencing. She holds degrees in human development psychology and occupational therapy with a certification in integrative health coaching and intuitive eating counseling. She's also working towards her certification in somatic experiencing. However, she considers her lived experience of recovery her most valuable asset. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Stefanie. Stefanie, it is such a delight to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Nice to meet you, Christina.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for being here. You are a wonder to me. I've seen your
Oh,
website.
thank you.
And yeah, there's a lot of interesting pieces there. You're an occupational therapist amongst other roles, and I would love if you could share just a little bit about who you are and the
Mm.
work that you're doing, especially with regards to people with binge eating.
So I'm Stephanie Michelle. I am an occupational therapist. Although I'm not an active occupational therapist anymore, I'm now working as a coach with people who are struggling with binge eating and other variations of disordered eating and eating disorders, including orthorexia and bulimia and restrictive tendencies. I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor, and most recently, I'm almost certified in somatic experiencing practitioning, which is working with the nervous system, and somatic therapy, which is more like body based therapy rather than just talk
Hmm.
therapy and cognition and even just emotions. It's about the regulation of the emotions in the body. And I came to all that through my own personal experience with all of those things. I developed an eating disorder when I was in my teens. I went through all variations and flavors of disordered eating and eating disorders up until I was turned 40, actually, at which point I recovered in my own kind of way, which is what I ended up, coaching about. And it's how what my philosophy is rooted in now and based on different versions of how I was restricting myself. But along that way, I became an occupational therapist. And one of the things that I learned about in OT school was the nervous system. And we worked on the nervous system with kids, mostly with ADHD and autism and
Yeah.
sensory processing disorders. And I remember
Hmm.
as I sat there and I was learning about all of these things, as I was myself struggling, thinking, why is this just like for kids? I felt like I resonated so much with the tools that they were teaching us to use and just even
Hmm.
just the paying attention to the body because that was
Hmm.
something that was so foreign to me and something that I was very disconnected from and didn't really even want to get into. I didn't feel a connection to my body in any kind of safe way. But this was about like using play and using pressure and using massage and using just different versions of touch and sound and sensation and movement to be connected to the body. And I just remember thinking, there's something in here for me. I don't really quite know what it is yet. And then, years later went into recovery and eventually started to get back into understanding the role of the nervous system in that and the way that neuroplasticity works and the way that, our somatic self is integrated into the symptoms that we're using to cope with our emotions. And
Hmm.
all of that kind of rolled into one, and so that's where I currently sit and why I currently coach the way I coach.
So I'm a PhD candidate and I'm studying somatic psychology. So it does also deal a lot with the body.
Mm,
And my sister has her doctorate in occupational therapy, and
mm,
we would be chatting about schooling stuff, and she generally works with kids, right? And so I
yeah.
I didn't really know what occupational therapy was deeply, but then through some of our conversations and me telling her about some of my ideas and musings about using the body in recovery, and she was telling me, some of that sounds to me like some of the sensory sort of approaches that they use within occupational therapy. And when she filled me in on that, my mind was blown because
Yeah.
I really liked the approach that the occupational therapists were using more so than I would say in like the traditional psychology route, even within
Mm,
somatic psychology. And so that
mm.
really incited me to explore more, even within the program. There's a lot of talk I've noticed that in occupational therapy, there tends to be more focus on like what they call the powerhouses of the senses, like proprioception, the vestibular sense, and like deep pressure touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why that would be, because it has such a drastic and immediate impact on the nervous system. And I myself also have felt like the healing that comes from like, just self-massage or like these different or lifting weights,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in somatic psychology, I would say that there's much more of an emphasis on interoception. As I've been reading through different books, I had that experience like, because there's like really heady books that it's like really dense and hard to understand, right? And then when you get to like workbooks, I would buy like workbooks off of Amazon or like
Yeah.
get different books, and they're like for kids, and it's like self-regulation. These books are like just, really playful and really good tools, but they are for children. And I'm like, why
Yeah.
can't there be things like this that are basically the equivalent, but that don't you make you kind of feel like so stupid, or that it's not,
Like a
what I'm
kid.
saying? Like,
Yes.
like just not super
Mm.
basic, but like have the same principles, but put it into language that an adult might resonate with, because I think that all of us need to develop these skills.
Yeah. And maybe that's growing more and more because I think I just see more of like, I don't know, even things like adult aerial silk classes or trampoline classes and things like that. Just the ways in which, I mean, with kids, we're working with play, really like using play as a means to develop exteroception and interoception, right? And to get into the nervous system. And this was the missing link at the time. My kids now like have all these, this access to gymnastics and to all, I mean, that's what we had, right? Like as kids, is
Right,
body-based feeling kind of activities that we lose touch with as adults because we got really heady. We
right.
go into the intellect, and not no shade to that. I love thinking and cognition. It's one of my favorite places to be is in my head. But it was like, where can I find access into the body in the same way? And I think there's a little bit more emerging awareness of the need for that throughout the lifespan, and not just in childhood, and not just when we have a diagnosis to warrant getting some OT. That it's actually
Right.
just more of a facet of living is being in our body.
Yeah, totally. I do agree that there is more and more awareness. Somatic, anything is becoming more understood and
Yeah.
trending topic.
Hmm.
And yeah, to me, it's been interesting to realize how much occupational therapy has been on the forefront of that in certain,
Yeah.
not all of them, but like especially certain aspects of occupational therapy, like the people who work in sensory processing challenges and so forth. Like they really have been talking about using the body for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think that it's more the field of psychology that has made somatic work more popular. One person told me, an occupational therapist told me that she thinks it's because psychologists are better at like quantifying, like occupational
Mm.
therapy. They're not necessarily as invested as in like research and like quantifying, whereas psychology is. So they're like putting stuff out there.
Yeah.
But really, occupational therapy has been doing this for a long
Yes.
time.
I also think too, and this is, to be honest, my bridge into it is there's something about psychology and psychologists and the intellect of it that people trust, and that appeals, it feels like more credible, right? So it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
bridged, if a psychologist is saying, or if a therapist is saying, that like to get into the body, maybe there's some credibility to it, because I used to only want to be in my head, even though I was an occupational therapist. Somehow it was like almost like this like permission slip to go towards the body and have that feel like a credible therapeutic intervention, as opposed to just play, or as opposed to just, the ways that OTs were doing this with children. So I think it's like almost taking the intellectual and the embodied and making it more scientific, to your point.
I'm imagining that your journey to recovery has to do partly with sensory regulation and,
Mm,
attuning to your body and stuff
yeah.
like that. But I'm wondering if you could speak on that. And then also like what are your favorite ways on an everyday basis to
Yeah.
maintain your recovery? Like how are you working with your body to like
Mm, mhm.
to stay feeling good and maintaining your
Yeah.
recovery?
When I look back and I think about what it was that I wanted when I started recovery, because most of my life, all I wanted was to maintain a small body. I mean, that was why, I mean, of course, there's deeper layers than that, but on the outside, it was like to keep a smaller body so that I could feel safer. That sense of safety has been like the theme that drove my recovery, and it drives my maintenance, essentially, is like how to feel safe in my body,
Mm,
how to feel safe in myself. And it's not just my body, it's also in my mind. Like, how do I keep
okay.
a regulated headspace? I mean, I grew up in in an environment where it was a lot of like roller coaster. It was a lot of ups. It was a lot of downs. It was a lot of chaos. It was a lot of turbulence.
Mhm.
And I think that what I was seeking through my eating disorder was really like I was trying to find some calm in the chaos. I was trying to find some stability through my body size. And when I recovered, it was more about, I guess, realizing the ways in which that wasn't working and the ways that that was
Mhm.
creating more and more chaos and how I might go about it differently. And so the goal became more about regulation. I did not have that term in my head at the time, but
Mhm.
that was what I was after. I was looking for like stability. I was looking for a sense in myself of something I could count on within me rather than something I could count on outside of me. And that became my guidepost and it still is. And so I worked on different areas where I was restricting. So I was restricting physically, but I was also restricting mentally. I had a lot of judgment of food, but I was also restricting a lot of my emotions. So I was comfortable getting angry, but I was not comfortable getting sad or feeling the discomfort of gray areas. I really, struggled with that, but I could be angry. So I thought I was feeling my emotions because a lot of people,
Mm.
it's usually the opposite or sad. More people can be comfortable with sadness and less so anger. So I started to look at the ways in I was restricting my emotions and how my emotions were coming up in my body. And what I was finding was that when I would feel something, even if it was anger, I would become so dysregulated from a physical standpoint. Like I would feel rushes of energy, like surging through my chest and my arms, coming up into my head. My thoughts would take on like this immense amount of energy. And it was basically just this like dysregulated cycle all the time. And so when I started to be with that and to kind of open up to like not intellectualizing that experience, but actually getting into my body during those experiences, including times where I binged or times where I was tempted to restrict, like in the way that would dysregulate me too. I would get so upset when I looked in the mirror, when I tried on a pair of pants, if I didn't look or if it didn't feel the way I wanted to feel. All of these emotions would exist in the body. And when I started my recovery process, it was about no longer restricting that experience. And so kind of almost like what I call it as like going underwater with it rather than running away from it. So this idea of like the surge that would come up in myself would like literally come from like, I don't know, somewhere deep in my stomach and in my core and come up, almost like this jolt of electricity. It's like visceral dysregulation. And I started to, instead of to try to push that down through a binge or to push that down through restriction, I would just sort of like almost the way, if you imagine, like let the wave like completely come over you and like be there. And
Yeah.
so I would just let it wash over me and it would be tingly and vibrant. And again, all I wanted to do was be like, I'm just going to eat, or I'm just going to,
Right.
I'm just going to like fast. But I started to let it be there. And the more that I could learn to tolerate the sensations of that, the more I started to be able to come out on the other side. A lot of this had to do with obviously not restricting anymore as well, and the physiological regulation that comes from that. But the emotional piece was more emotional and sensory based. And so how I handle that now, I mean, the ways that I stay in recovery now have to do with not restricting my food to degrees that compromise my biology blueprint
Yeah.
for my body size, and also using movement not to control my body, but to be in my body. So one of the ways that exercise used to exist for me was a means of controlling, and movement now is a way that I get energy through, like again that angry kind of energy that comes up, a fair amount. It's like moving that through, actually like not storing it in my system, not trying to push it back down, but actually to move it out and move it through it, to be with it. It's more like of an intentional practice of being with it. And I would say movement is probably one of my primary resources for it, but I also do a lot of going underwater. I do a lot of like when I feel things in my day to day, I close my eyes, as I'm doing now, but like I will close my eyes and just rule out all my other senses and allow the like sensations in my body to like fully rise and come up and over me if they need to, and wait until they fall and wait until they change in some way to kind of communicate back to myself like, okay, this experience is okay. It's safe to be with. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to take me over. It doesn't need to dysregulate me. It just needs a minute. So that's a practice that I've had to work really hard to even get the patients to do and implement in my routine.
I think that's such an important skill. And I know that so many of us who've struggled with binging and like that dissociative element, we struggle with that. I know that there were so many times that I'm like, I'm going to, let myself feel the feeling. And then I just I couldn't. And so I'm wondering, when you made that decision, like, I'm just going to let that wave come over me. I'm going to feel this and I'm just going to be with this. How did you go from like constantly binging to like being able to feel the
Hmm.
feelings completely?
I started becoming interested in somatic experiencing. And so I had a somatic experiencing therapist. So we would meet only once every month in the beginning. And at first, it was just a lot of learning about what even it meant to be in my body. Because also, I think the first time this was introduced to me, somebody said something like, "Oh, I just, drop into the body." And I was like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Like that sounded nice, but I just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It took me a long time to figure out what that was, to practice it, to give myself the experience of like tuning into what that was. Because I think looking back, if you'd asked me, 5 years ago to go into the body, I think the only thing I would have been able to do is to recognize tension in my chest or like fluttering in my chest and the second I felt it, I would have wanted to get out. And then I would have probably intellectualized the rest of it. My somatic therapist had me practice very incrementally, like how to be in it and then how to let myself leave and to give me permission to do that, but to also just have a mindfulness that I was doing that. And she started out by saying, I noticed that you can tolerate this for about 2 seconds before you leave. She goes, "That's where we start. We start with 2 seconds." And I remember feeling like, I mean, not that I explicitly thought this, but I remember thinking like, "Oh, don't you need like an hour of meditation?" And she's like, "This is not what this is. Like, it's, you can tolerate 2 seconds. That's where we're going to be. That's your practice, is 2 seconds at a time." And so it was, that felt like doable, where I was just allowing myself for 2 seconds of some kind of flooding sensation and then understanding, okay, now I can feel myself leaving and that's okay. Just be aware that I'm leaving. So I could almost tell the difference. And then that capacity grew and grew and grew in more and more sessions over time. And with somebody on the other side helping you, I think it's a different experience than doing it by yourself, because there's somebody who's kind of got your back,
Yeah.
who's skilled in this, who's like letting you, they're a container for it for you. And
Mhm.
that was really helpful to me, to feel like I wasn't all by myself. And then when I had some big emotions come up, she would be there to handle that, to sort of be that presence through it, which was something that I had that was very absent in my childhood, right? Like this was not something
Mm.
I ever learned how to do, how to feel safely. And so that to me was kind of the almost the repair part of that rupture. And that was a practice that was several years in the making and grew. My capacity to tolerate those sensations grew. I would still say that there's times now where I can feel myself becoming overwhelmed with sensations and needing to leave. But I think it's more about, I have the compassion to say, like, yeah, that's what's happening. I'm becoming overwhelmed and I need to leave. I need to leave now. But I don't need to do that through binging. I don't need to do that through restricting, because I'm giving myself permission to exit now. And I know that I'll re-enter, and it's not a scary thing. It's just an overwhelming thing. And I have respect for that.
It sounds like that therapist who was you were working with somatic experiencing was super helpful with you. And I mean, I think ultimately that is the missing piece when we're trying to get over like binge eating disorder, like being able to, stay present with that wave and
Yeah.
being able to do that over time. And then now
Yeah.
you actually are about to be certified in somatic experiencing. Like how does that feel to kind of be coming around to
Yeah.
full circle?
It is a feedback loop all the time. So I'm still in somatic therapy, and it's a practice for me now. And so I receive and I also offer. So I love it. And this is also what binge recovery coaching does for me too. It's like, when you know what it's like to be on the other side, to be sort of the one exploring this or feeling these things, it's such a helpful tool to be the helper, because you're like, I know where you are. I know what that feels like on that side of this dynamic. And that helps me inform, what I'm doing with people, how to read people's energies, how to understand, and how to knowing, like, almost like what somebody might need to hear, or what's the right touch where, when, because it's what I need as well half the time. So I do a lot of relating when I work with clients of like, I don't want to just be like, okay, here's what we're going to do next. And here's what we're going to do. It's a lot of like,
Mhm.
oh gosh, this on Monday in my session, like this is what happened to me. And just becoming human with somebody else. And like, we are really just all doing the same thing. We're all figuring it out and feeling the same feelings. I don't think anybody's got a map. I don't think anybody's got the answers, all of the answers. And so humanizing this experience, I think, is part of making someone feel safe, and to feel like someone understands and someone's got you and someone's been through it too. And we don't all have the answers anyway. And that's okay. It's not about that. It's about exploring this safely with another human being. I think to me, somatic work and nervous system work and feelings and emotional regulation is about knowing we're human and that we're all human. And that connection piece is the safest thing of all. And that's really to me what it comes down to is like, can I be safe in this feeling? Can I be safe with myself? And can I be safe with another human being? That is the most powerful thing, more so than the actual like feeling itself, so to speak. It's the safety of having the feeling.
I love that. That just feel like time's slowing down. Like, can I be safe with this human? Can I be safe with this feeling? Like,
Yeah. And that slowing down piece.
I'd love to talk about some of these gems that you have on Instagram. I was going through and highlighted some things I'd love to chat with you about. For example, you have this post that I'm looking at that talks about how to self-soothe without food.
Yeah.
And it talks about grounding yourself, like literally, it says grounding yourself literally. Find a spot on the floor and plant yourself there. I also really like laying down on the ground. So that was one of the tools. Also, contain yourself, also literally wrapping yourself in a blanket or a weighted blanket. Ask for an enveloping hug. Wrap your arms around yourself, crawl into a tight space. If you have access to one, cocoon. Another tool, free yourself, move, shake, dance, spread your arms wide, spin around and take up space, wiggle, be silly. I love that one as well. And then pivot yourself. Use bold sensory input to wake yourself up. Ice on the hands or cold water on the face, loud music, deep pressure, smell a rich scent of a candle or laundry detergent. That really spoke to me because I'm really interested in these specific sensory strategies. And those are all excellent ones. I just like the way that you worded it, like grounding and then the containing and the free yourself, the wiggling and the shaking and the pivoting with the bold. I call it like strong sensory input.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about anything that comes to mind with that.
The first thing that comes to mind with that is I probably tried some of those things in the thick of, a binge or something like that. And it didn't work. And I would have gotten really discouraged at that and assumed, "Ugh, this is just more, I don't know, like, why am I bothering? Because this stuff doesn't work anyway." And the ways that sensory tools have helped me has not been overnight. Again, I can't emphasize this enough because even the idea of cocooning or grounding. Let's take grounding as one. I've always been somebody like, I love getting on the floor to the point where when I was younger, I didn't know why I was doing that, and my mom would always be like, "Why are you on the floor? Like, get off the floor." I'm like, I think I was trying to ground myself, just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But when I would use it as a means to kind of be coping with a larger like in a binge moment, the dysregulation is so high that would be a moment where I was like, okay, like let me try one of these tools, and it wouldn't work. And I think that is because in a moment like that, being in my body wasn't safe. Like when I was again that dysregulated, going into the body was the opposite of what felt intuitive. It was like slowing down didn't feel intuitive. I shaking all of these efforts to like sort of come in connection with the body wouldn't, again, I had 2 seconds of capacity for that.
Right.
So those tools became more effective when I practiced them outside of dysregulation longer, because that helped me understand it was safe to be in my body and that I could grow capacity to be in my body. And eventually that became a safe place that I could use in a dysregulated moment. But that took a lot of effort to build. So that's a distinction I like to make, because I think sometimes people are like, I'm so desperate, I really need a tool. Let me use this thing I saw on Instagram. That didn't work. This can't be for me. Somatic tools aren't for me. And it's kind of like there's sometimes there's a preparation work to do to be able to tolerate that kind of a thing in the body. And other times I'll work with clients who honestly, I'll get on a session with them and they'll be in a state of dysregulation. I had this happen the other week. Somebody had just gotten laid off from her job and had come onto a session, and she's like, I feel a binge urge, and we did this grounding practice, and then we did a movement practice, and she soaked it up like I've never seen somebody soak it up in this way. Her whole system just like, it was like made, she was like waiting for it. And her whole, she just it spent the entire hour really in a grounding place and then really moving this through her body, almost like she was just in it. She was so present. And so it's not always the case that it doesn't work, and your system might pick it up really quickly, but sometimes not. And I was somebody who was had more work to do to prepare my body for that before it really had an impact.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I came, I found body-based strategies to be really helpful, but this was after like I also had a huge history with binge eating. I think I probably went over 25 years of binging, not just like blind binging, but like really trying to like for many, many, many years, like really trying to like get over it and like doing therapy and different types of therapies, not just talk therapy. And I remember hearing people say things like, "Oh, feel your feelings and just take a bath and like write in your journal, call a friend." I'd be like, if anyone fucking says it, I'm gonna murder
Yeah.
them, because
Yes. I hated that.
yeah, yeah. But then it wasn't until like much later that I felt like that I understood it. And it is, you're right, it is about readiness. And there's so many things that can influence the readiness. And like when you're in this heightened state of nervous system arousal, when you're experiencing an urge to binge, you don't have the full array of
Yeah.
logic and your tools available. So like you're gonna be forgetting things. And so maybe at some time you had learned grounding or like the things that we were just mentioning, but then when that binge urge hits and then they forget it because they haven't been practicing and practicing and like
Yeah.
doing it at, other times of the day when they're not having an urge to binge. And then of course it makes sense that they're not going to remember that thing if that's not like a natural part of the
Yes.
toolkit. I believe you also mentioned this in this post is about restriction. And
Mm.
if someone's not nourished, and I think that that also speaks to a whole host of other sort of health issues that could be going on if they're not sleeping well, or if they have like
Hmm.
just insane amounts of stress, or there's some sort of, yeah, anything like circadian or hormonal, something that goes beyond, just being able to apply a body-based strategy. They are helpful, but I don't think that they're necessarily the most helpful in like an emergency state, like
Correct. Yes.
the
Yes.
the the earlier you can catch it and use a sensory strategy, I think the more helpful that they are.
Yes, I always think about there's like this window of opportunity where they're like really helpful, but then there's a place beyond that. And to your point too, if there is physiological dysregulation coming from a lack of like sleep, like the basic needs, right?
Hmm.
Nourishment, and these are hard pressed to, they're not. And that I do see, more and more on social media, the idea of using somatic tools to use that as a binge strategy, or an eating disorder management strategy in the absence of working through the physiological dysregulations of restrictions or
Hmm.
sleep deprivation, or things like
Right,
that.
right,
And that they're not useful then.
right, right. Another thing, I'm going to pull up another post that I saw from you that I thought was interesting is you said, "Did you know that certain parts of your nervous system are primed for action, not calming down? When you're in the action state, binging may feel safer than soothing techniques because eating is action oriented." So I thought that was really interesting because I have kind of been exploring that, in my program and in my studies, like, do I tend to fight, flight, freeze, fawn? And
Yeah.
when I feel that binge urge, I'm just like, I need to go.
Yep.
Like, I need to leave. Like, there's something about leaving
Mhm.
and going. And then also, I've noticed that, like, I have been historically avoidant attachment. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm a leaving type of person.
Yeah.
Like, I need to go. And so if I think about that, I think about, okay, well, what would my nervous system need? And like, I have thought about, well, the alerting type of strategies or the soothing type of strategies, and how do we know what we need, because sometimes you're stressed and so you want to do something that's soothing, but then
Yeah.
also you're tired so you want to do something alerting, and just trying to kind of like make sense of everything about like, well, what is it that someone needs? And I think that there's not always one thing, like
It's true.
there's not necessarily one answer. But I do think that a lot of times, in my experience, something that is a little bit more active has been more helpful, because like if you think about like, okay, I'm feeling an urge to binge, if I were to just be like, okay, just lay underneath
Right.
like a soft blanket or just like lie down on a couch or something, I think that I might be there for a second and be like, now it's
Yes.
time to get up, grab those
Yeah.
keys,
You're gonna wind
Missy.
that. up even more.
Yeah, so then I have enjoyed doing things that are more active. So you had put some examples of shake it out, lift something heavy, slam a pillow.
Yeah.
So I love those. But I just really found it really interesting that you made a distinction of eating as an action, and that when you're working with a binge urge, you might want to incorporate something that is more active as opposed to something that's more soothing. So I'm wondering if you could share what your thoughts are now.
When I was in, I guess I was 20 years old, I left college to go to this clinic essentially for an eating disorder. And I remember at that time I had just started binging, and I had gotten into bulimia. I had just developed symptoms of bulimia as well. And I remember that in this clinic there were all different types of eating disorders, and some people were like just restrictors, some people were restrict bingers, some people were just bingers. And I remember it was the first time that I had this thought in my head when I was listening to somebody talk about their restriction. And I remember sitting there and I was thinking to myself, because I had come from an anorexic history and I didn't have access to it anymore. And I was thinking to myself, I don't remember what it's like to restrict and have that be my only tool, because you're not doing anything. And I remember feeling like I need to do something. I'm more fight or flighty. I'm more fighty than flighty. Again, I grew up in a very loud household. And so I learned how to be loud and how to do and how to act and how to blah. And so that lives in my body. And when I get activated in any way, my instinct is to blah, it's to do it's, and I can feel it like energy. Like even now, I just feel this energy coming through my body. And when the ask was to like settle, it was like telling this energy in my body to shut up, which energy doesn't die. It just gets compressed or suppressed, right? And then the more you wind up the wind up toy, right, the faster it's going to go when you release it. And that whole idea, again, I would put together later, but that's how I sort of feel about if you've got fight or flight in your body. And the binge is a way of acting, which it's not always, and I'll talk about that in a second. But like that is what your nervous system is trying to do, is trying to expel the energy of the adrenaline, the cortisol that is built up right there. And it's literally sitting in your joints and muscles, and it's ready to go. It's ready to fight. It's ready to or flee. And that the need is action. And sometimes we're using food as an action. And so again, it's not like going to be, oh, okay, well, in that case, I'll just lift some weights and then I won't binge, because there's probably other things going on that are creating the binge response. But I will talk about like, what if we sort of incorporate both, or like, what if, yeah, I might need to eat and that might need to be the action because it's also related to safety somehow, but also like, what am I noticing about my need to be moving? What about, am I noticing about the need for that rhythmic sort of soothing, chewing, crunching? Like, how am I understanding that as part of what my nervous system is trying to actually do?
Hmm.
Versus somebody who uses binging as a what I call a blanket. So I think binges can be active processes of doing, but they can also be hiding and freezing. Like they can be a way
Hmm.
of just covering something up. It's an interesting, I think, exploration for somebody to look at, like, how are you using food? Are you using it as a way to like vocalize something, or do something, or say something, or to get something done? Or are you using it as a way to hide and like retreat and numb and collapse? And just even noticing that, and usually that's to do more with shutting off, going unconscious, those unconscious binges as opposed to those more conscious, almost violent ones. How are you noticing the impact of food? How are you using that food? And how can that be a clue into what your nervous system is actually looking to do to feel safe? If it is a doing, we might need to actually be moving and incorporating actions. If it's a soothing, it might be we need to cocoon, we need to hide under a blanket, we need to actually find ourselves in a safe place where we feel like we're out of sight and out of vulnerability, because essentially that's what the nervous system is looking for, because the nervous system is so old and it's not up to date in terms of what our actual threats are. So it really is looking to move that adrenaline, or it's looking to hide and suppress. So food is just the conduit we use to get that job done.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing exploration. And I feel like I still have, things that I'm working to figure out, like
Yeah.
trying to understand, like,
Yeah. What
you
do I
know,
need?
yeah, yeah, what do I need? What do I need? Why am I doing? Why do I do the things that I do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's complex. And I think we're all exploring that too.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm in that position where I'm like, is this a moment where I actually need to rest and I'm just pushing myself? Or is this a moment where I actually do need to do, but I need to and on the way that I just explore that is trial and error. It's okay if I don't get it right. I'll just keep the pursuit going and I'll learn from the pursuit and keep collecting data That's just the way that I look at it. I'm always collecting data.
That's wonderful. You have a lot of wisdom to share, a lot of experience, lived experience, as well as wisdom to share. I understand you have some sort of courses already available and you have a new course coming up. I'm wondering if you could share with me and
Yeah.
whoever might be watching or listening, what do you have that we can
Mm.
learn from?
So I have about 4 courses. They're offered at different times of the year. I have a binge recovery course, a body image workshop, and a nervous system regulation and somatic experiencing course. But what I have coming up is called Refining Intuitive, and it was formerly a gentle nutrition mindset workshop from the intuitive eating model. So looking at people who maybe have adopted intuitive eating principles as a means of recovery and are feeling stuck in the permissive place. So intuitive eating can often be kind of misperceived as like as an excuse to binge, essentially. It's like letting yourself eat whatever you want whenever you want, and kind of refining intuitive looks at taking those principles and concepts and I think developing them more so that it's not just this like blanket permission to eat and then we're stuck in this binge helplessness, but more of like what does it mean to actually attune to what we need and how do we figure out how to incorporate nutrition in without restriction and what does it mean to be more aligned with what the way we're eating through intuitive eating principles without feeling like we've just traded restriction for permission to overeat all the time.
I love that nuance.
And that's available. That starts on the end of April. So I'm enrolling for that now.
Okay. So basically you have these 4 courses that people can sign up for.
Different parts of the year. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's wonderful. If people want to follow you, is the website the best or Instagram? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My website is open 24 hours a day and it's probably the best way to get in touch with me. But I am on Instagram pretty much daily. I have a lot of content there, lots of archived content for like 5 years. So there's tons to learn in there. And also I have emails that go out every Wednesday if you're looking to touch base with me in a different way with new content.
And then don't you have a podcast?
I do. Yes. I have a podcast called Life After Diets. I co-host it with Sarah Dosanjh, the binge eating therapist. We're almost at 200 episodes now. So yes, that's another
Wow.
resource.
Amazing. Wonderful. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Stefanie. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.